Hey guys, welcome back to the Pulling Curls podcast. Today on episode 235, we are talking about the Cascade of Interventions. So let's untangle it.
Hi, I'm Hilary, a serial overcomplicator. I'm also a nurse, mom to three, and the curly head behind Pulling Curls and the Pregnancy Nurse. This podcast aims to help us stop overcomplicating things and remember how much easier it is to keep things simple. Let's smooth out those snarls with Pregnancy and Parenting Untangled, the Pulling Curls podcast.
This episode is sponsored by the online prenatal class for couples. If you want to know more about how the Cascade of Intervention can work for you in your labor, come join me. In just 3 hours, we can get you feeling prepared for your upcoming birth. Okay, so you might hear the words Cascade of Interventions mentioned, I feel like mostly by doulas. I don't hear it mentioned by a lot of people online, but it mostly means that when you make choice A, like let's say you're doing the choose your own adventure that you loved in elementary school, right? When you make choice A, then you may have chances to do B or C, or you don't have a chance to do XYZ, right? So let's give an example. Let's say you go in for an induction. You have immediately increased your chance of a C-section because inductions are higher risk. That doesn't mean that you will have a C-section, but it does mean that you have an increased chance of an induction. It also means that you need an IV. It also means that you have a higher likelihood, again, doesn't mean you're going to have to, but you have a higher likelihood of wanting an epidural. So as you can imagine, once you make the choice to have that induction, you then are more likely to have other choices come for you further down the line. Versus, let's say you are in early labor and you decide to stay at home until you really can't take it anymore, and then you go to the hospital. Well, your chances of needing an epidural are less because hopefully you've progressed a lot more and you maybe can just make it on your own until you can start to push, which, by the way, pushing feels so much better. So that's a pro tip for you guys. The Cascade of Interventions is something that a lot of people mention because there are things that start to add on. And it is something that your provider should bring up, maybe not using those words, but when you scheduled an induction, you are increasing your likelihood of a C-section. You're more likely to want an epidural, mostly because an induction is super boring. It lasts a little bit longer, and you know, you're just going to want some rest usually, I find. Although most people, studies don't show this, but a lot of people feel like an induction is more painful than natural labor, and everybody varies on that. Let's give another example. If you choose to get an epidural, there are some cascades of interventions that often start. Initially, we give you extra fluid so that your blood pressure doesn't drop after you have the epidural placed. And then sometimes the baby doesn't love it because your blood pressure still drops a little bit. And so we might come in, we might stop your induction for a little bit if that's what's going on. We might turn you side to side. So once you've made the choice to have the epidural, there are some other interventions, meaning stuff we do at the hospital, that may need to be done to help you compensate. And there is always the chance that your blood pressure falls, baby doesn't look so good, and then we have to have a C-section. It's super, super rare, but it is a possible cascade of interventions that was started by making the choice to have an epidural. Now, I have to tell you guys that I was so worried about the cascade of interventions when I went in to have my last induction that I would not let them break my water, because I knew that once I broke my water, there was no going back. I couldn't go home. My only option was a C-section if I didn't progress. And I had been 5 centimeters for a really long time. But I was just sitting there saying, no, 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 because I was afraid of this cascade of interventions. And that didn't do me any favors. Me living in fear of the cascade of interventions mostly just made labor longer. Honestly, I think I probably could have done it without an epidural, because I just sat there being like, no, 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 I'm not going to let him break my water. And then I started to get tired and I wanted to nap, right? It was just hurting longer and longer. Whereas once they broke my water, within an hour or two, she was born. Boom. I think it would have happened if I had just let them break my water a little bit earlier. Now, something I see online that people are like, oh, that's going to start the cascade of interventions, is getting an IV. Just because we place an IV doesn't mean that we're for sure going to use Pitocin on it, or you're for sure going to want IV pain meds, or what got an epidural. Placing an IV is a safety measure. I would not call it the beginning of the cascade of interventions. Now, if you want an epidural, you need an IV. So it is part of that cascade of interventions, I guess you could say. But I see so often people saying, oh, everyone refuses the IV because they don't want providers to induce them with Pitocin. Then you refuse the Pitocin. It's not part of a cascade of interventions. I just think that most of this is really important, that you understand that once you make one choice, just like in the Choose Your Own Adventure book in 4th grade, you are limiting or enhancing your future choices, right? But everything in life is like that. You made the choice to get pregnant. And so now you have the choice on how you're going to give birth and all those different kinds of things. So life is a cascade of interventions. We all understand that when you make one choice, you're closing some doors and you're opening others. And this is just how it works in labor and delivery. So don't be scared of it. Don't be like Hilary saying, no, no, no. Sometimes you can just embrace the cascade of interventions, do what works for you at that point in time. Don't be scared about what's going to come down the line, and make the best choices for you right then. Now, this is the final episode of season 5. We will see you guys in the fall in season 6, and I hope you guys have a wonderful summer. We'll see you then.
Thanks for joining us on the Pulling Curls podcast today. If you liked today's episode, please consider reviewing, sharing, subscribing. It really helps our podcast grow. Thank you.